Hi everybody, welcome to today's webinar. We're going to be talking about the Corporate Fibre and Materials Benchmark. I'm Liesl Truscott, the Director of the Fibres and Materials team at Textile Exchange, and I'm here today with my colleague Sophia Opaskalski, and together we'll be bringing you the webinar today and going backwards and forwards a little bit between us to give you a change of voices. So for anybody that knows the program already, you may have already noticed a slight change in the title of the slide, or of the program, I should say. We have given it a slight new branding. It's now the Corporate Fibre and Materials Benchmark, whereas once it was called the Preferred Fibre and Materials Benchmark. So I thought I'd bring that up straight away to assure you you are in the right webinar, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But since we think most of you are quite new to the program, we'll spend a little bit of time today just introducing the topic of benchmarking and getting you a little bit more familiar with the program. Then we'll launch into a bit of a run-up to this year's launch of the survey in May, and just to let you know the steps involved and make sure you're prepared for the launch of the benchmark in May. And then there's a few extra pieces that we'll talk about that will be on offer to you to support your journey into benchmarking. So welcome everybody. We thought to get us started, we'd love to hear a little bit about who's with us today. So we have 3 short polls in total, and I'm going to hand the technology over to Sophia to get it started. The first one is, there we go, there's the actual poll. So how much do you already know about the Textile Exchange benchmarking program? And there's a few choices there. If you're all familiar with using a poll, if anybody has any problems, yell out. We'll keep this a fairly informal webinar. But yes, everybody looks like they're already starting to respond. Choices are: I know nothing, I know a little bit, I know a lot about it. And the other one was, I know a lot of, oh, we have 2, I know a lot about it. Okay, so nobody knows a lot about it, even though we asked you twice. So that's good. You're in the right webinar once again. Thanks, Sophia. Yeah, there was a 4th option there. My company's been involved, but I'm new to the program. So we added that one to the poll in case your company's been involved, but you yourself are brand new to the program. Anyway, it looks like it's a very tight draw between knowing pretty much nothing about it to knowing very little. So that's really helpful for us as we talk you through the program and make sure that we're keeping at the elementary level. Then there is a opportunity, of course, to ask questions throughout the presentation. So please do use the chat box in your dashboard panel and send us any questions as they arise, and we'll make sure we check those regularly and respond to any questions that come up. Okay, so moving on to the second poll, which is about you and your role within your company. So you can see the list here. Your role is mainly around sustainability. You're a communications or marketing person. You're working in the design team or product development. You're a company owner or a sort of executive director, or other. We know this is not a perfect categorization, so once again, feel free to pop anything in the chat box if you feel like we've missed something really vital in the groups. Okay, so results are showing that the majority of you, or half of you, almost half of you, are working in sustainability teams. None of you are coming from communications or marketing. There's a nice healthy chunk of you, 21%, that are designers, product developers. That's great. 11% are company owners. Brilliant. I'm glad we put that one in there. And another 21% are in another category, And it looks like you've been super interactive and possibly given some information on who you are. This is fabulous. I think we've got to put a good start if we're all interactive. So somebody's Matthew's a materials developer, and Kayla is in operations. Fabulous. Now we have one more question for you, and then we'll let you relax. Okay, so this is about whether your company has a specific fibre and materials sustainability strategy. So it could be any kind of strategy, but does it incorporate the sustainability of your fibres and materials? So a much simpler answering form. So it's changing rapidly as we speak. This is quite fun. Right, so just over half of you, 58%, have said yes. Nobody said absolutely no, but we do have, okay, it's shifting a little bit as the final ones come in. Okay, I think it's stopped now. 63% yes and 38% under development. So that's really interesting and great news for us, because we think, great, there's a good chunk of you already with strategies in place, and they may or may not be at various degrees of maturity, but we have a good chunk that are launching into this field. So that's super to know as well. Brilliant. Thank you for your engagement. Perfect. Okay, so just a very brief overview of why we have even really bothered with a benchmarking program. And the main reason is that we see this aligns really well with our strategic goals and vision for the textile industry and for the role that we can play within the fibre and materials area. We want to drive that adoption of preferred fibres and materials. At the same time, there's an absolute need to maintain integrity and increase integrity through the value chain and everything that we do. We want to be able to collectively drive impact and action. So there is the piece about supporting companies, but there's very much a piece about collaboration that I know we're all very keen on now. There's always more awareness to raise and bring in that leadership and that voice and that opportunity to learn from others. So we're that reservoir of education, information, vignettes, storytelling. And we've increasingly adopted the Sustainable Development Goals as integrated our strategy into these goals set by the United Nations. So we think that's an interesting opportunity for you as well as companies with, as we know, increasing pressure to be a strong part of that solution over the next 15 years or so to meet those goals. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. So the overarching strapline or intentions behind the benchmark program is to help companies systematically measure, manage and integrate a preferred fibre material strategy into your mainstream business operations. That's what we intend to do and support you doing within this program. So Helen Crowley, the head of sustainable sourcing innovation at Kering, puts it in a really nice way, and she says it is the sourcing of raw materials that is the direct interface between business and nature. Through sustainable sourcing and reconfiguring supply chains, we can help drive change in agriculture, mining and forestry and promote regenerative wildlife-friendly approaches to production. So I think it's that direct interface that's a very, very powerful recognition. And I think also the mention of other sectors, other industries that we're increasingly aware of being very intimately connected to. You know, in the textile industry, we think about textiles, of course, but this interface with nature and interface with agriculture and forestry and that back to the raw material is becoming, increasingly crystallized, I think, for us as an industry, and our role within that is becoming clearer, although lots to do. Okay, so let's hear from some others that have talked about the importance of raw materials and the importance and the role of benchmarking. If I can get my technology to work for you, I can take you directly to the video and
it's time to take bold action now.
Our resources are finite.
The biggest risk facing business is to meet increased demand with decreased availability of natural resources.
Measuring is critical. You can't manage what you don't measure.
If you, as a company, don't know what you're using, how much you're using, and where your impacts are, you're kind of just guessing.
Sourcing more preferred fibers and materials is a key element.
How committed are you?
Let's commit to sourcing raw materials with fairness and with integrity.
Fashion is the perfect instrument to drive systemic change. It can promote fairness and sustainable practices like no other industry.
It's a melting pot of an enormous range of environmental and social challenges. And the biggest threat is to ensure equitable access to the goods that the industry produces in a way that ensures that we're working within environmental limits.
So sustainability isn't just the fibers and materials that you source, it's the people that you source with, it's the factories making the good, it's the patterns, it's how you buy.
Investors are really today looking for progress and not perfection. They want decision-useful information on our material business risks, such as chemicals, raw materials, and social and environmental impacts.
We've learned a lot through our journey of sourcing certified organic cotton, which is effectively applied to other sustainable fibers.
Measuring and benchmarking allows the apparel industry and the massive supporting supply chains to find common ground and solve the problems that we all face in a way that's far more meaningful than just one brand picking a solution that works for them.
The measurement allows us to understand our baseline and to set targets for where we want to get to, and clearly allow us to track progress towards those targets.
When we think about sustainability as a business strategy, it does start with the raw materials. That's where our biggest impact is as a company.
It's time to not only focus on driving volumes of more sustainable fibers and building a resilient supply chain, but also on the integrity of the fibers themselves.
The preferred fiber and material benchmark is one of the only tools available to brands that really pushes them to understand what materials they're using, know what percentage is sustainable, and kind of understand, the traceability, chain of custody aspect of that.
The preferred fiber and material survey is a perfect complement for the brand module that the Higg Index provides through the SAC.
It provides us insight on where we stand in the industry, and it gives us also insight on where we still have opportunities to grow.
That we are one human family living on one common planet, and we all have the delightful obligation to try to create positive change.
Let's honor the value of people, the soil, energy, and water. We only have this one road, and if we don't take care of it, who will?
Right. Are you still all with me? I hope that wasn't too jerky. And it is available to go back to and see on our website at any date, any later date you wish to go and revisit it. So that was just to give you a taste of some of the highlights of the program and some of the reasons why we think it's important and supports companies on things that are becoming increasingly important. Speaking of importance and recognition of I guess, this growing world of benchmarking. It feels like, from my position, benchmarking has become very fashionable again. We're seeing more of it happen around sustainability standards. We've seen the launch of the World Benchmarking Alliance that I'll talk a little bit about as well. And we've seen the ICEAL Alliance, that is the members group for driving standards and their performance and credibility and performance improvements. So ICEAL has also taken on a look at the benchmarking criteria and standards, if you like, that are used to benchmark both sustainability standards, but also companies. So corporate benchmarks such as this one fall into that category. They're running a consultation phase at the moment into the development of a guide, and that guide will be used to help manage and build consistency and set good practices around operating benchmarks. So we're very much involved in that process with ICEAL, and supporting the development of that guide. We're also allies of the World Benchmarking Alliance, a relatively new program that you may not have heard of yet. It was set up a few years ago by the United Nations Foundation, along with mainly with a fairly big insurance company called Aviva. And since then, more and more governments, particularly in Europe, have got engaged with this program and are supporting and funding the rollout of this World Benchmarking Alliance. So they spent the first year of their life running roundtables and consulting with various people around what a benchmark program would look like that would drive corporate action towards the Sustainable Development Goals. That's the raison d'etre of this program, is to support and in some ways, push companies to accelerate their activities around the SDGs, and they're using the mechanism of a benchmark to do that. And you can see in the blue box on the right-hand side, the priority areas thus far for the World Benchmarking Alliance, and there's 5 listed there, 5 benchmarks that are under development, with actually the bottom one, seafood, being the most developed. There's some consultation going on at the moment around gender equality and empowerment, and it looks like, surprise, surprise, apparel will be one of the industries that benchmark will be looking at, and we can tell you a little bit more about that if you're interested. I put the corporate human rights benchmark logo down there too. They've been a key ally right from the start, and between the development of the WBA and the work that's already been going on in the corporate human rights benchmark, the program has been developed, the strategy developed, and we're very much engaged now on that further development. One wonderful thing that I thought the World Benchmarking Alliance did very, very nicely was really succinctly put together why benchmarks work. And I think this is very true. I first got involved with benchmarking at the Business for the Community, who was running a corporate responsibility index for FTSE listed companies, and I very much witnessed that, as I do now with the fibre materials benchmark, that there are these sort of 5 big buckets of opportunities. They've done well, they can very clearly articulate what is wanted by society, from society, and put it into a framework that is business friendly, or at least provide some of that structure and information that can then be communicated back, and that dialogue continue with society about what these needs are and how business is responding. And of course, they're more and more focused on this contribution to sustainability. We're looking, as I mentioned earlier, at this connection with the Sustainable Development Goals. So for companies to engage in something that will drive this race to the top, that competitive streak is always something that can be helpful in these situations. And then I think anyway that past competition, you then reach this place of collaboration again, where you can share and learn and grow from that experience of pushing boundaries and accelerating good practice. And of course, this opportunity to consistently track progress. If everybody's using the same yardsticks, more or less, then that is much, much easier to communicate out from an industry-wide perspective on how we are all doing. And then this dialogue, this opportunity to talk to your shareholders, your colleagues, your consumers, your investment companies on how you're actually doing around these certain things through, once again, this sort of almost independent vantage point. We don't do this single-handedly, and I wanted to just spend a few minutes telling you about our relationship with 73bit. So 73bit is a company that runs the platform that we use called ProBench. For those that, and most of you that haven't been involved in the program yet, you will soon get to know what ProBench is all about. It's a very secure platform that maintains a robust confidentiality, at least from a technical perspective, of your data. And of course, we handle the personal confidentiality and protection of your data. It's very, very important to us and to the credibility of this program, of course. So confidentiality is key. Your portal is confidential to you, your library of feedback reports, your past archive of submissions, everything is secure within your portal, but of course you have that convenience of having everything located in one place. And you can see the little suite of logos there as well to show you that we are in fine company. This is just a handful of some of the other benchmarks that 73bit run. So you can see Bill and Melinda Gates fund a program called Access to Nutrition Index. The UN have a couple of programs running through ProBench, their Principles for Responsible Investment and their finance program. The Farm Animal Welfare benchmark is run through ProBench, and a transparency benchmark by Share Action is another example. Right, so why benchmark? I've already shared with you the kind of the mantra that we have around measuring, managing, and integrating into mainstream business operations. But to put that in I guess a more street credible, street cred way, is this quote that we often use. You know you're getting better. In fact, you think you're about 10% better than last year, and that's great if the industry's moving along at a slower rate. But what if they're actually powering along and your growth is actually lagging behind the rest of the industry? So this is a little bit about what benchmarking can do. It can put your level of investment and energy and effort into some kind of perspective, and obviously there's very many more dimensions to that perspective as well. It also, as I think I mentioned at the start, but this is probably the critical thing that we want to get out of our relationship with you, is supporting this transition to a preferred fibre material portfolio. That's the crux of what we're trying to support you with. And we're doing that because we know that some of the biggest impacts are at the production of the raw materials. You need to know where you're sourcing. You need to know what some of those risks are associated with regions, locations, particular sourcing, or government or societal issues. So putting that into that kind of perspective for you to manage that risk and obviously the opportunities associated with that. You now need to be setting targets. It's one thing to say you're going to use some organic cotton or use some recycled materials, but putting that into something that gives you that structure and also that transparency around setting targets, and then rallying everybody in your organisation to start working to achieve those targets, measuring that progress, and then being able to communicate. That's what we help you with There's a few more bullet points down there. We do see the framework of the benchmark program as a roadmap. We think, and we've consulted very widely, that the elements to the framework are very much aligned with the industry's understanding of what good practice is to build out a robust strategy, how to manage a portfolio approach. We all know there's a lot of options these days, and we don't think it's one size fits all. It may, as a company, you may decide that it's organic fair trade right down the line for cotton, or you might think, the Better Cotton Initiative supports us in our particular business model, and that's the one we're going for. Or you might, I'm just pulling out some examples, you might have a completely different lineup of preferred fibers and materials in that strategy, or you may be evolving that strategy over time and align with what's available and what best practice might be and where your company is positioned, and suddenly there's the opportunity to source more recycled cotton into that portfolio mix. So we do see this as a sort of not one size fits all, as a kind of continuously evolving situation, and very much tailored to the needs of your organization. And we all know that there is a need and an expectation of more and more transparency. And what does that mean for different stakeholders of your business? What does that mean for you managing your risks and opportunities? The materiality for specific stakeholders. So this part is quite key. I mean, as an organization, we don't put anything into the public domain, but we do ask you about what you put into the public domain, and how you manage the data consistency and quality. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later, Sophia and I will, because data quality, data consistency is important to you and also important to the robustness of the leaderboards and information that comes out the other end. So we'll talk a bit more about collaborations. We're involved with many organizations and having some good exchanges around how to reduce burden and fatigue on your side, how to get more alignment with different programs, and then also how we can communicate that into our reports and dashboards and ways to support you in communicating to different stakeholders. I mentioned this link to the Sustainable Development Goals. It is a universal language. It does involve all parts of society, developed and less developed countries, developing countries, are all expected to contribute and meet the goals. And as I said earlier, companies are expected to play a big role in that. And there's been different organizations such as the World Business Council for Sustainable Development has actually monetized some of these opportunities to not only deliver the goals, but to transform the way business is done and the way we value and I guess make profit from our business activities. So that's an interesting and potentially very powerful part of the SDGs. And we can help with that. We'll talk a little bit more about how this is more integrated into the benchmarking program this year as we get more feedback from you over the years and then able to use that to drive the changes in the benchmark program. What do you get out of participation? So we've sort of divided this into 3 levels of opportunity. It's like anything, the more you put in, the more you get out of it. We're available through the submission period. I mean, starting from now, we hope to build that relationship with you. We can support you as you build your team and start collecting the data and becoming familiar with the portal and loading the information in. Over every year we improve the guidance materials, 73-bit, improve the portal. The tools that are available just continue to get better. And then, of course, there's this really valuable process of once you've submitted your survey, the review phase starts, and that can be as very interactive. We come back to you, we look for completion, accuracy, evidence, and go through this year even more robust review of your data and submission. We may set up conference calls. It's all part of the learning opportunity. We'll talk a bit more later about this transformation from very static PDFs, text-heavy feedback reports into something that's more digitalized, more interactive, and we're really excited about this change this year and how we prepare your feedback report cards. Likewise with what we'll be able to put online in terms of leaderboards and vignettes and raising visibility. So this is all a reward, if you like, for taking part, and we also love to be able to share some of the good news and successes. And then we've also set up a string of consulting services that we can help you with, from gap analysis to coming out and presenting results, or talking with your teams, and generally help you even be beyond the actual program and into other ways to learn and grow. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the improvements that we've made, and we'll make sure that, obviously ask any questions as we go along. I can't see any questions yet, but please do feel free to stop us. This just shows a snapshot of where we have got to over the last few years. We had 111 companies last year. It's increased every year. The scores have improved year on year. And there have been a good solid number of companies that have stayed with us right from the pilot year through to last year, and we're hoping to grow even more. So I'm going to now hand it over to Sophia to talk a little bit about the ways we're growing and improving the program. Sophia, I'll hand it over to you.
Yes. So yeah, as Little said, we have done the program for 3 years now, and that's a point where we thought it's good to stop for a while, get some really, we got really valuable feedback, and started with the review process. And the priority areas for the review process were harmonization with other initiatives and improving the data quality. We also looked at how we can grow the participation rates and simplify and streamline the survey to make it easier and avoid duplication. We focus more on circularity and sustainable development goals. And we reviewed the definition of preferred, as it's becoming more and more important, and others refer to this definition. We thought it's also important to update the process, and particularly, for example, around the preferred man-made cellulosics definitions. And we looked at how we can improve the company feedback and the public reports, so the results that come out at the other end of the survey. And then we also had a look at the business model for the whole program. And this review phase, and in general the program, has been kindly supported by C&A and Chibo, which was really, really important and helpful in order to run this program. And yeah, we really have to thank them. And next slide, please. Yeah, as said, one important part of the review process was the harmonization with other initiatives. These are obviously longer term conversations and dialogues. But we started a couple of very interesting and important conversations with a number of different initiatives and frameworks. In the beginning, we developed a long list of potential other frameworks and initiatives based on feedback that we received from the steering committees and other stakeholders. And then together with them, we prioritized them. And you can see some of the logos here of some key stakeholders and initiatives where we thought, yeah, we have to have a closer look how to make it really sure that we avoid duplication, we have consistency in terms of terms and definition, in terms of questions wherever possible, and to harmonize it and make it more efficient and really complementary. And for example, the Sustainable Apparel Coalition runs the brand and retailer module, and they're currently reviewing their program as well. And in their latest proposal, they suggested also to refer to the definition of preferred fibers and materials that we have, and to align some of the questions around fibers and materials. And we also have signed a partnership with the German Partnership for Sustainable Textiles last year, and started first very specific and concrete projects together. One is the project around a guidance document for a consistent methodology how to calculate fiber-related volumes, which the project was also supported by RAP, which runs the Sustainable Cotton Action Plan in the UK. And we will focus a bit more on this on the next slides. And you can see a few further initiatives here where we sought alliance. Next slides. I'm handing it over to Liesl again.
Thanks, Sophia. Yeah, just I know this is all very new to everybody on the call, but I thought it would be worth telling you just the same. We've been running the, if you like, the leaderboards, or originally the top 10s they were called, for at least 10 years now, and that started off with a very primitive collection of data from companies that we thought were probably using a lot of organic cotton. That was I guess the origins of our leaderboards that we have today. And we collected some of the, we asked them to tell us how much, basically. And over the years, we've expanded the number of fibers that we're asking for consumption data on, and we've refined the process, and we've got a bit clearer on conversion factors. We've provided a fiber converter for companies to use to enter units and blends and weights and things. So we've got a little bit more sophisticated over time, but now with an increasing number of companies taking part, increasing number of targets being set, and the need to provide more and more rigor, especially in the public domain, on how we as an organization collect this data and the methodology that we use to report out on our leaderboards has become increasingly important to us and to you. And we're excited about that. We have built our knowledge through the process, and we've helped other companies with their data collection systems. So together with the two logos here on the page, as Sophia mentioned, with WRAP in the UK and the Partnership for Sustainable Textiles in Germany, we've come together to develop a guide that will build in some best practices and some methodology around how to best collect data for consistency, comparability, and to build in that rigor into the program. This is exciting. We've had about 50 companies. I think there's more every day at the moment coming in, feeding back to our questionnaire on this topic, and we'll be using that and some of the one-on-one interviews and other conversations we've had with other experts to arrive at a guidance document that will be essential, I think, to the program, the benchmarking program with us, and feed into other programs that you as a company will be reporting to as well. So building that harmonization and consistency across different programs, I think, is a key outcome that the partners and Textile Exchange are very excited about being able to provide. So this will create more transparency, and I really hope for you as a company completing this, it will give you more of a how-to methodology for arriving at your consumption figures. It will involve a guidance document as well as what we call a metadata form, which will give that sort of paper trail on the steps involved in that process. And this will have a knock-on effect. You know, you can be more confident in the data, you can be more confident in how other data is collected, and therefore how that comparison with other companies looks. You know, when you report this data out, or variations of it out to your stakeholders, that you've got this sort of validation. I won't say verification, but you will have at least a validation of that data behind the results, and that will hopefully build in more credibility, more confidence for everybody. So we're excited about this piece of work, and I wanted to just tell you a little bit more about it. I can see there's a question. And a nice bit of feedback. Thank you for letting us know that you're enjoying the webinar. It's made my day. We like to hear things like that. We also like to get helpful criticism as well, a constructive criticism. So please feel free to challenge us when you do need to know more. We're very open to the dialogue. But thank you for that feedback. Before handing it back to you, Sophia, I just mentioned in this call that the way we've approached the benchmarking is through an invite out from us. It's what we call a business-led program, so it's voluntary. Companies participate from their own free will. We don't expect companies to take part, but this year, which is a little bit different from some benchmarks where they've identified the key companies or the organizations that fall into their universe to be benchmarked, and that may be based on risk, it may be based on turnover, it may be based on any other relevancy as to why they are, if you like, targeted for benchmarking. This is business-led, race to the top approach. However, this year we have identified a list of companies that fall into our criteria of the majority. Sorry, I'll say that again. We'd like to collect at least 75% of companies' participation by market share, which would mean that as a result we would be able to be more comparable with the overall picture of the industry. So that would give us just more definition of who's involved within this universe. We're also looking at piloting the program for suppliers. We've had a number of suppliers interested, their corporations as well, also playing very big roles in this transition to sustainability. So we're looking at how can we pilot this, and that will probably begin after we launch the brand and retailers program in May, but encouraging and inviting manufacturers to join us in piloting the program and seeing how that works out for other members of the textile industry. So I'm just checking questions. No more questions, no more nice comments coming in just yet. Sophia, handing it back to you to talk about some of the improvements in the survey.
Yeah. An important part of the review was also simplifying and streamlining the survey, as said before, and we reduced the number of questions. It just deleted a few questions, and another way how we simplified and streamlined the survey was by consolidating modules. Initially, I mean, probably most of you are not aware how the initial framework looked, but we had one module, one set of questions for each preferred fiber and materials type. So for example, we had one module and set of questions for organic cotton or for recycled polyester. And we have grouped them together now to modules for fiber types such as cotton as such or polyester as such. It's still obviously very important to report on the different preferred fiber and materials, but we just removed some repetition in terms of the questions and made the whole survey a bit smoother and streamlined. Next slide, please. And as we received quite a bit of feedback from different stakeholders and participants, that the topic of circularity is obviously increasingly more important. We have added a new module on circularity, so including a few questions around the topic of circular economy. We will show a little bit more when we show you the framework a bit later. And another important part of the survey remains the sustainable development goals. So we had already a question around the sustainable development goals in the earlier version, but we are expanding it a bit, looking closer at SDG target setting and also at progress tracking. But in general, the questions remains aligned with the UN Global Compact question on SDGs. But we embed the topic of SDGs also further in the overall framework and program, and will link to the SDGs from various questions and indicators in the overall survey. Next slide, please.
And Sophia, I can just see a couple of quick questions that might be now a good time to pause, because we're going to get further and further away. There was one question about how the MSI developed by the SAC is aligned with this program, and that's a really, really good question. Sophia mentioned earlier about our discussions with the SAC and looking at our alignment on fibers and materials and the definitions and the calculation methodologies and that side of it, and how that kind of complements and dovetails with the brand and retail module that the SAC are developing. In terms of the MSI, so the Material Sustainability Index, we include a question about how companies, what tools they're using to model impact. So of course the MSI is actually taking volumes. So, one complementary fit I would say to you, Jaswant, is that the data that we're supporting companies collect and calculate, may end up being more robust as a result of, and more consistent across different companies through this system. And then, of course, that data, that consumption data, is the basis of equating your impact, your environmental footprint and environmental savings that can be calculated through the MSI. That's probably the biggest fit. We see the MSI tool as the industry standard for converting to different ways of modelling impact based on LCA. In saying that, we know there's a lot of exciting work going on at the moment in terms of expanding some of the criteria that come within LCA and therefore potentially the MSI. Currently, we struggle with land use, biodiversity, carbon sequestration, some of those issues that in open natural systems that are very hard to equate. And of course, you've got socioeconomic indicators as well. So we see the MSI as something that the industry is rallying behind to continuously improve the way we measure and evaluate impact. So I hope that's helpful. You can follow up again if need to. There are a couple, quite a few more questions. Great, somebody's interested in the pilot for manufacturers. Fantastic. At the moment, yes, Natalia, it's 4 brands. So yeah, apparel, textile, home textile, hospitality. We're in the next sort of more hands-on webinar. We'll talk you through a bit more of the detail around that. So I won't spend much time now. Get my mouse to behave here. And yes, I should have mentioned right from the start, it's always a question on top of the list. Yes, the copy of this presentation will be available and also the recording. So yes, my housekeeping was not quite sufficient at the start. So thank you for your questions. Keep them coming. I'm looking at the time and thinking we may end up going into the additional half hour we set. So hopefully you can all join us. We may not need the full half hour extra, but we shall, yes, we've set that aside just in case we've got lots of questions. The other thing worth mentioning, so back to the rollout of the webinar, is this definition of a preferred. Now, one thing we're sort of comfortable with is that sustainability is not stagnant. It's not a one-size-fits-all. It is continuously evolving in our understanding of what it means to be sustainable, as well as our expectations on performance. And that's the world we're operating in. So I think, as I mentioned earlier, we do see this as this is driven by your portfolio and a portfolio of options. But what we do like to help you with is, what does it actually mean to be preferred, to be more progressive, and how to tap into that continuous improvement and that continuous drive to do more. And I think it's quite interesting to say, after 3 years of running this program, we've seen company portfolios change quite interestingly over the years, from one set of fibres to something that I think, probably to give you a real case in point, the increased introduction of recycled content. So recycled cotton has been an interesting evolution for some brands in terms of what they consider preferred and what their portfolio of options are. And we're perfectly aware that for especially big brands with big demands on fibre, there's scaling that's required, there's technologies and quality improvements that are needed, So, you know, there are some options that are possibly safer and more secure than others, and then there'll be others that, you know, you'll be wanting to drive and see improve. And yeah, that whole picture of creating a portfolio and continuously driving improvement is something that we promote, and we're also working on how we can best categorize and what sort of continuum there might be in terms of working towards that improvement. So we focus on the pre-spin. So at the very start, we hadn't really teased out you know, the growing of the feedstock or the collection of the feedstock, if you're looking at post-consumer, with maybe the primary processing, whether it's the ginning, whether it's the pulping with man-made cellulosics, whatever that sort of, and then the secondary process, whether it's the actual fiber production. But we look at that piece from the actual feedstock, you know, harvesting, growing, etc., through to where it enters if you like, a more conventional part of the supply chain, from spinning, weaving, knitting, fabric making, etc. So that pre-spin is what we focus on with this definition of fiber or material. We're specifically looking at what is happening within man-made cellulosic fibers. So this is a growing area of interest amongst us, amongst our colleagues, is what does it mean to do man-made cellulosics well at all those various phases of production up to pre-spin. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail except to say that our colleague Simone Seisel is running an excellent inquiry process at the moment. Once again, if you'd like to find out more about that, although I know we're trying to wrap that consultation phase up and then sort of look at what the results are showing and have something back out to you on you know, where this is heading in terms of understanding that portfolio of choices, the best practices available at the moment, etc. So that is coming too. I'm just looking at the questions very quickly here. The hands-on webinar, Natila, where we'll tell you more about that soon for sure. You're a step ahead of me. Another question from Queen. For natural fibers, is the preferred fibers benchmark moving more completely to MMCF? What about natural fibers? So yeah, that's a really good question, and I might even leave that for Sophia, who will talk a little bit about the portfolio, where, yes, I think if I understand correctly, you know, sometimes it's very hard to draw those concrete lines in the sand between sort of one fiber category and another, but maybe Sophia, you could touch on that in a bit more detail soon. Yeah, there's a lot of interest in the man-made cellulosic piece, so we'll get to that a little bit more in a minute. But so thanks for your questions, Queen, about that. Okay, this is my exciting kind of excited piece, is about how we're improving the company feedback reporting to you. I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but with 73-bit, we are looking at going from these sort of very static, quite functionable, I hope to say, feedback reports to you as companies, but into something that is a lot more interactive, and you'll be able to see very clearly, very visually, the graphics, the positioning, the progress trends, that sort of thing. It's still under development, and I suspect this year, you know, as our first year, we'll be just excited to make that transition and have this available for you. And of course, your feedback, your recommendations, and will continue to drive the improvement of this. But it will be a big step for us to move into dashboarding of results. I guess the other thing to mention here in terms of what will be going into the public domain is whilst we will probably still look at, the ways to compare and contrast your performance, because I think everybody's interested in knowing where they sit in terms of uptake and volume, that sort of thing, which our leaderboards have been based on over the years. But we've been asked by many, and we're quite excited about this as well, is that it's not only about how much of a fibre that is being taken up by a company. It's a great piece, but it's that whole integrity management, performance management of that action that is as important to this drive towards preferred and this drive towards a sustainable portfolio. So we're looking at broadening the way we talk about some of the leaderboards, and the changes to the benchmark I think will help us do that. And Sophia will be talking a little bit more detail about some of the key elements to the framework that I think you'll really like. Yeah, we're running this by you as well. So we're looking at, as this program continues to grow, and we've been very resistant to putting any barrier to entry to the program, but we're also very aware that it's to deliver a robust and a program that you feel confident in and that delivers to the needs of the industry. We are looking at moving from the review process that I mentioned before into something that will include a validation of some of the data that comes in, particularly around quantitative data that goes into the consumption reporting. So that's going to be new. We're looking at asking a voluntary participation fee this year. We're not springing any big changes on you in that regard this year, but then we'll look at ways that we will have to employ to manage the cost of doing the validation, and also the risk, if you like, of putting data out into the public domain that hasn't gone through the validation process. So this is still very much under development, but through some of our colleagues and peers and stakeholders who want to see more data validation, we'll be looking to ways to support that. So interested in your thoughts and feedback, and obviously more to say on that topic, but it won't affect you too much this year, unless you'd like to support that process, and then we'd love to hear from you. So that's something that we're figuring out. Okay, unless there's any more questions on any of that, I'm going to pass it back to Sophia to talk us through some of the key elements of the program in the run-up to May 6.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. Yes, so I will introduce, first of all, the framework of the survey. So what you can see here is the structure of the actual questionnaire. There will be 3 main sections. One section on strategy and integration that asks about your general fiber and material strategy and how well sustainability is integrated into your overall fiber and material strategy. So there will be 6 questions that ask, for example, about leadership and responsibilities within the company with regard to sustainability of fibers and materials, a question on risk management and on goals, on customer engagement, and also on reporting. So this is a first general part asking about sustainable fiber and material strategy. And then the second section will have a closer look at your different fiber and materials and the overall fiber and materials portfolio management and performance. So there will be also 6 types of questions, and all of these questions will be asked per fiber category. So for example, for cotton or for wool or whatever other fiber type you're using. So there will be a question about the portfolio overview, what types of preferred cottons you're using, for example, or what types of wool or polyester. And then a question on risk management, how the key risks in each fiber category are currently managed, and whether there is some investment in and how this investment looks into a specific fiber, and a question around transparency. So, for example, whether you have started to map your suppliers, and whether you know the origin of the fibers, and around targets. So whether you have, for example, set a target for the uptake of more sustainable cotton or for more recycled polyester. And last but not least, the question around the uptake volumes, which also has led to the development of the leaderboards in the past, but yeah, will be integrated into the overall assessment this year. And the new section is the section on circularity, with questions around circularity strategy, and then asking a few questions based on the hierarchy of waste. So starting from reduction of fibers and materials, and then questions around design for circularity and collection of fibers and materials up to repair and recycle. Maybe to in general to say, so it's a tool to measure progress. There's always the option to just indicate that a certain aspect is not yet covered or is in development. But it really helps companies, I think, to identify where they stand and where their gaps may be and where they can improve performance. Next slide. Yeah, and here you can see the categorization of the fibers. So one fiber module will be on cotton, then there will be a fiber module for polyester and nylon. And nylon is new this year because many participants wanted to see it. And there will be a module on man-made cellulosic fibers, one on animal fibers on wool, one on down, and then we will have a module for other fibers and materials such as linen, hemp, or leather. This one will not be as detailed as the other ones, but it gives the opportunity to also report on these other fibers and materials. And in general, also coming back to the question that was raised earlier, there is not one fiber and material where we feel everybody should use it. It's really about a portfolio and a diversity and a suite of different preferred fibers and materials. And it really depends on the organizational priorities and considerations of impacts, what the preferred choice of options is. So for example, within cotton fibers, there are preferred options like organic cotton or BCI or cotton made in Africa and others, or recycled cotton. But it's there's equally preferable options in man-made cellulosic fibers, for example, or in wool or down. So in every fiber category, there are it's possible to move to more sustainable options, and it's really about embedding a strategy that leads to preferred options, replacing unsustainable or less sustainable options, and it's about a continuous improvement and yeah, trying to choose these options that create the most positive impact and building a portfolio of fibers that fit to your specific needs. But it's not that we weight organic fair trade cotton better than FSC-based lyocell or vice versa. So it's really within each fiber category, there can be more sustainable options.
And Sophia, just to quickly add to that, because it's a really interesting point, reflecting back over the 3 or 4 years where, you know, a while ago, companies would, if you like, have a pet fiber. I mean, it's going to be natural that a highly technical outdoor brand will be, you know, using a lot more synthetic fibers, and, you know, a natural sort of based classic brand a lot more cotton. And we used to see sort of very siloed approaches to any work in sustainability or, you know, preferred fibers that really didn't always have a big connection with the key, you know, the big volumes that a company might be using, or the, you know, the majority of their fibers. It would be almost like a pet project, if you like. And I say that, you know, just recognizing how far we've come at an industry where there is, you know, we're all looking more across the entire use of fibers and materials, you know, within the company, and identifying, prioritizing and identifying risk and opportunity. And I think on the flip side of that, if you like, that the options and the knowledge and the know-how and the alternatives have come along as well. So, you know, it's very much a need to identify and have that portfolio approach, but also the options need to be there and the work done to sort of build those options and those value chains and those initiatives. So yeah, just a little reflection there. And whilst I have the mic, I noticed we have a question from Charlotte, and maybe now's a good time to respond to that one, Charlotte, about the difference between the benchmark and the consumption tracker. And I'll just point out that I'm very impressed that you know there are these two options. That's brilliant. You've done some reading. The short answer is the benchmark is the entire program. It's the questions that Sophia was talking about on the other stage, on their page, sorry, the complete framework and strategic approach that the framework provides. However, we're very conscious that some companies, for example, may have signed up to a specific program, and we haven't really touched on this yet, but an example would be the RPET commitment. As a company, you're a signatory to that, or the 2025 Sustainable Cotton program, whatever that commitment might be. Or even if you're just wanting to track your data and keep it in a repository and be able to, you know, get a rudimentary feedback on your consumption data. That's what the consumption tracker will offer you. You can sign up, you can have your portal, you can enter your data, you can, you know, have that system provided. It's a light touch, if you like, because it's very focused on the consumption data, but arguably not so light, because that's one of the hardest things to do, is to be able to report your consumption data. So that's the role it plays, as a light touch in terms of entering the consumption data. We do ask a couple of questions around that as well, because we want to, you know, make sure it's not just about the fiber consumption, but that there's some context around the sustainability standards that you're using, that, you know, the chain of custody process, that we ask you a couple of questions around that as well, to give it just a little bit more holistic understanding of what you're doing in that fiber. So I hope that answers. Oh, and then we've had a few more pop in. It was mentioned that hemp won't be as detailed as others. Is there work being done to make this robust for the future? That's a super question, Katie. So we've built the others out, and what we genuinely will do with this is see what sort of numbers come back. And it's always a bit tricky, because, you know, some of these ones are the cutting edge fibers, if you like, and we're not so interested in your highly polluting fibers, but where we're seeing potential, particularly around, linen and hemp, and some of the programs that are happening around leather and non-animal based leather. There are things that we're exploring a bit further, and with the demand from companies, yes, we do see this portfolio options change and grow. So we want to see what comes back. We're doing, a little bit of work on things like linen, and as I mentioned before, there's the feedstock element. There's with linen the retting phase and that sort of thing, where the impacts will vary. So same with hemp. So yeah, so that's a growing area, and we certainly want to start capturing any data we can around that, just to see what sort of growth we're experiencing in the industry. Natalia wants to know about costs. Maybe, Natalie, if you wouldn't mind just typing back in if you're talking about program costs, or if you're talking about costs within some of the questions that we might be asking about market value, anything like that. I'm not quite sure. Ida, I'm trying to get my mouse to work. Ida wonders how much the impact of processing of the fibers and including in the we'll come back about that, Ida. That's a really good question. It's still being developed, but this year, for example, we do include a risk-based question around, for example, the cotton growing, but have also identified some of the key risks that you will find in the gin, which aren't as many. There's not as many people involved, and it's a more contained process. But some of this is supporting you on understanding these risks a bit more fully. And we're sure there will be gaps, and that's that is part of the process, really, is to support where are these real gaps. Part of it is great to show the leadership, and when everybody can say yes, we're doing all of this, but hopefully a really useful and constructive part of the program will be to saying, hey, this is a risk we hadn't thought about before. Where do we start on this one? So you will see a little bit more differentiation in the survey than, well, you won't be able to compare it, but yeah, in the past. Kwans thinks the portfolio approach makes sense. That's great. We are really interested in your thoughts on this, because this is as good as the feedback and the industry alignment and your perception of what is helpful. That's kind of the key underpinning reality with benchmarking, is that it needs a lot of a good percentage of the industry taking part, so you do get a benchmark, and B, it needs to align what we all think and agree is good and best practice. Otherwise we wouldn't look to it for that benchmark, if you like. Hemp linen kept with leather will not. Yeah, I mean, for the convenience of this slide, Jaswant, we've put others into one box, but no, leather and non-animal leather, I think we're looking at, is separated out from the fiber boxes. You'll see it's a little bit of a blended model, but it's kind of been teased out, that we can, if I've answered your question correctly, or so all mentioned 6 sections have certifications individually for ensuring sustainability. We're going to look at what tools and systems you have in place to build integrity into your strategy, Jaswant. So that ranges from a thorough risk and opportunity assessment, through to sort of a level of transparency around where you're sourcing, the regions you're sourcing from, and the risks associated with those regions, and your knowledge of suppliers within those regions. And then what are the standards, certifications, supplier tools, which there are more and more of these days, that are supporting your chain of custody and your assurance and integrity into those fibers that you're sourcing. And ideally the impacts, we're ultimately we're interested in impact, the outcomes, not so, more so than the inputs, but we're also very conscious that this is an evolving field that we want to work very closely with you on how we model those impacts. And we've done a little bit of that in the past. We work with the SAC on that, and we know we're keen to look at some of the socioeconomic impacts and things as well. We want to get to a world where we know that it's not just that we have this portfolio of more sustainable options, but that we can actually start to see and measure impact. And that's probably a 2-hour webinar in itself, and I'll stop there because it's one of my pet interests. So thanks for bringing it up. Okay, Sophia, back to business. Here we are at the steps involved.
Yes, so here I want to give you just a brief overview of the cycle for the corporate fiber and material benchmark. So it is an annual program. We review the program annually from October to April and upgrade it. And this year we had a major review, which we do every 3 years. And then we have the participation phase in May, June. And the survey is being launched in May. This year it's being planned to be launched on May 6th and will be open until end of June. And then from July, August, there will be the review of the submissions and the preparation of the results. And then in September, the company feedback and sector reports will be published. And from October to November, there's the conference, there's a peer learning program, and there are further opportunities for engagement for other types of consulting or working based on the results. There are different ways how to engage. So one is obviously the Corporate Fiber and Materials Benchmark Program. This is also linked to the 2025 Sustainable Cotton Challenge, which is also run through this Corporate Fiber and Materials Benchmark Program. So we measure and track the progress on sustainable cotton use of the ones who committed to the Cotton 2025 Challenge, which is a commitment where brands commit to using 100% sustainable cotton by 2025. And there's also the RPET commitment, where companies commit to increase their share of recycled polyester to 25% by 2020. And as was mentioned earlier, there's the overall benchmark survey, and there's also the consumption tracker. So the overall benchmark sector, you will get a complete company feedback report. If you use the lighter consumption tracker only version, then you will get a basic progress report only. Next slide, please.
Yeah, there's a good question here, and I feel like a change of voices might come in. If I read the question out, I know you've done a little bit of thinking about this as well. We all have in preparation for this year, but the question is from Gudrun, and it's: do you suggest multi-branded corporations to fill the survey for all brands, or is there an option to combine the results this year? Do you want to have a stab at that one?
Yes, so it is possible to report as a company, including different brands, and we even recommended that multi-branded corporations report on the corporation level and not for every individual brand, but it is also possible if you wish to report for different brands then, or different product lines even. Then it is required that one survey has to be submitted for each of the individual brands or product lines.
Perfect. I hope that helps, Gudrun. Happy to follow up as well if there's more questions around that. We know it's more complex for big organisations to do that, but we have done some good thinking on it. Kwan has just asked me, so I owe him an elaboration on what I meant by impact. It's a good question. So over the years, Kwan, we've looked at high-level impacts. I mean, aggregating impacts into things like greenhouse gas emissions, water, obviously, is one, and energy consumption. So looking at, I guess, those savings that life cycle assessment results can provide through, just looking at the fibre production part of the life cycle, and where we have data and where the MSI has got data, we can look at what some of those savings and thus impacts can be by using a preferred or a lower impact fibre option. We tend not to compare across fibres, but look deeply into best in class within particular fibres. And yeah, as I said, I could talk for a while on this, but I'm very conscious that, where some fibres may do really well in one impact area, say water, it may not do so well in another impact area, say greenhouse gas use emissions. So those are the types of challenges that we see in arriving at impact, as well as using global averages, which we think are the best we have at the moment. With a lot of LCA data, we're looking at global averages or weighted averages, but we're seeing the future move towards more regionalised awareness of sort of background risks and issues such as water scarcity, etc. So it's a constantly evolving area. I could probably give a little plug for our conference this year in Vancouver, where some of these conversations are being held. But yes, impact is so important, and figuring out the best way to report that is, I think, our need for more granulation and more understanding is sort of opening up as our understanding improves, but also as some of the technology improves for managing this sort of data as well. So maybe a more detailed answer than you needed, but it is about those, in this case, environmental impacts and hopefully social impacts that can be modelled and evaluated. Right, I'm now looking at the time we have. I think we're on the last few slides now, Sophia, aren't we? So we'll do a race to the to the end of the webinar.
Yes, so I think, I covered the timeline already a bit. So the survey submission, the survey will be opened, released on May 6th and be open until end of June. And then there will be the review process from June to August, and the feedback reports and the leaderboard, insights report and leaderboards will be published end of September. Next slide, please. And data to prepare for the benchmark. So what would be good if you could already start preparing, or at least trying to identify the people that can help to collect these data, is are data around the fiber consumption for the reporting period. That will be the year 2018 or respective reporting year by fiber type, and also different types of preferred fibers or more sustainable fibers, as well as your supplier lists, so the different suppliers for the different fiber categories, and the documentation on your fiber certification in the supply chain. And the next webinar with more hands-on details will be scheduled for May 6th. We will share the time and the details, login details very soon. And this next webinar will present the online portal, including some exciting new functionalities, the detailed survey questions and submission requirements, the guidance options, as well as the scoring methodology. So we really recommend you all to be part in this webinar. And I'm handing over to Liesl again to say a few last words on the team.
Thanks, Sophia. Yes, we've got a few photos up here. I can see people are starting to have to leave, but you all stayed to the end, so thank you very much. Here's some of the faces. There are a few more. We're all doing slightly different parts within Textile Exchange, but everybody here in one way or another is involved in developing the program. There's Sophia and I and our colleague Nicole, that particularly between Sophia and Nicole, there's a lot of work going on in finalising the survey and the guidance material. Simone Seisel, I mentioned, is leading on the man-made cellulosics revision. And if you just drop down to her, Stephanie Maurice on Simone's left, bottom left, just to let you know, Stephanie Maurice is running the consumption review, consumption data guide. So these are two people that you may have spoken to, or let me know if you'd like to contribute to either of those pieces of work. Yvonne and Sutyen are the data and analytics team. They're the ones with the data skills for managing the ProBench program and the scoring methodology, along with Vikram and Gautam, who are not really officially part of the team, but feel like part of the team, our 73-bit colleagues that are, as we speak, setting up the program and doing some wonderful new additions this year in the portals. So that will be all complete for you in May. And some expert help from Corey Skunt in the bottom right-hand corner there from Forward Impact. So Corey's been helping us out with the circularity module, which is a big step for us, and we're very grateful to have her help as well. So that's some of us. Oh, Serena is our new intern, who will certainly be there hands-on to help with your questions and fielding your needs to the rest of us as well. So you'll hear more from Serena soon. Okay, I think we're very much at the bottom of the hour and a half. We did need all the time. Thank you once again for taking part and for your questions. The finale questions necessary to be remembered to be able to participate in the survey. The answer is no, Charlotte. You're all welcome to take part, and we'll follow up with some more details on that process soon. So have a good rest of your Tuesday, everybody, and yes, let us know how we can help you. We look forward to keeping in touch. Thanks for joining. Bye-bye.